The bullet tore through her back just as strong arms caught her fall. Leon May had been running for 3 days straight, running from a man who treated women like cattle, running from a past that had stripped away every shred of her dignity. The dusty frontier town of Sentinel Creek offered no sanctuary, only witnesses who turned their backs. But when Dominic Vane's hired gun pulled the trigger, a stranger stepped between her and death itself. Cole Maddox didn't ask questions. He just held her bleeding body against his chest and whispered words that would change both their lives forever. "You're safe now. If you want to see how far love can reach when two broken souls refuse to let go, stay until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels." The scorching August sun beat down on Sentinel Creek like a punishment from above. Dust devils spiraled through the unpaved main street, carrying the scent of horse manure, gun oil, and desperation. It was the kind of town where people learned early not to see too much, not to hear too much, and especially not to interfere. Leon May had learned that lesson the hard way. She stumbled past the general store, her worn boots kicking up small clouds with each unsteady step. Her dark hair, once carefully pinned, now hung in sweat-dampened strands across her face. The simple cotton dress she wore, pale blue, now stained with trail dust and God knew what else, clung to her thin frame. She'd lost weight in the 6 months since Dominic Vane had purchased her contract from the San Francisco Employment Agency. Lost weight, lost hope, lost everything that made her feel human. But 3 days ago, she'd found something she thought was gone forever. Rage. It started as an ember, buried deep beneath layers of fear and shame. Then she'd seen the letters. Vane's correspondence with territorial officials, detailing bribes, land theft, and worse. Much worse. Women brought in on false promises, trapped, used, discarded. She'd recognized names. Some she'd known personally. Others were just ghosts in Vane's meticulous records. That ember became a fire. She'd stolen the letters, stuffed them in a leather satchel, and run. Now, 70 miles from Vane's sprawling ranch, her body was giving out. Her lungs burned with each breath. Her vision blurred at the edges. The wound on her shoulder, where she'd scraped against a fence during her escape, throbbed with a heat that suggested infection. Just a little further, she told herself. The telegraph office. Send the letters to the territorial marshal. Then what? She had no plan beyond that. No money. No friends. Nowhere to go. Behind her, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Leon May's heart seized. She risked a glance backward and saw them. 3 riders, dust rising in their wake like smoke from hellfire. Even at this distance, she recognized the lead horse, a massive black gelding that Vane's right-hand man, Ray Cutler, rode like it was an extension of his own cruelty. They'd found her. She tried to run faster, but her legs betrayed her. Her foot caught on a raised board in the walkway, and she pitched forward, catching herself on a wooden post. Pain shot through her infected shoulder. A woman sweeping her porch nearby glanced up, made eye contact with Leon May for just a second, then quickly turned and went inside. The door closed. The lock clicked. No one would help. No one ever did. Leon May pushed off the post and kept moving, her breathing ragged now, each gasp feeling like swallowing hot sand. The telegraph office was just ahead, a small wooden building with a faded sign and barred windows. So close. The hoofbeats thundered closer. "There!" Cutler's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a blade. "Don't let that Chinese whore get away!" The slur hit her like a physical blow, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Her fingers fumbled with the satchel strap across her chest, making sure it was secure. The letters were everything. The only thing that mattered. She was 10 feet from the telegraph office when the shot rang out. The sound cracked through the street, sharp, final, unmistakable. Birds scattered from nearby rooftops. A woman screamed somewhere. Leon May felt the impact before she heard the sound. A massive force struck her back, just below her left shoulder blade. The world tilted. The ground rushed up to meet her. But she never hit it. Strong arms caught her mid-fall, pulling her against a solid chest. The scent of leather and sage filled her nostrils. She gasped, trying to understand what was happening, trying to process the sudden shift from falling to being held. "I got you," a low voice said near her ear. "I got you." Leon May's vision swam. She looked up and saw a face, weathered, tanned, with eyes the color of winter sky. A strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, a scar running along his left cheekbone, old and faded. He couldn't have been much older than 35, but his eyes held the kind of weight that came from seeing too much. "Let her go!" Cutler's voice boomed from horseback. "That woman's property of Mr. Dominic Vane. You're interfering with—" "She's bleeding," the stranger said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel that made Cutler pause mid-sentence. "Shot in the back." "You did this?" Leon May felt warmth spreading across her back, soaking into the stranger's shirt. Her blood. So much blood. The pain hadn't hit yet. Shock was a mercy that way, but she could feel her strength draining with each pulse of her heart. "That ain't your concern, mister." Cutler shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward the revolver at his hip. "Mr. Vane paid good money for that one. She stole from him. She's going back." The stranger, she didn't even know his name, pulled her closer, almost protective. His arm tightened around her waist, supporting her weight entirely now, as her legs began to buckle. "Over my dead body," he said quietly. The street had gone silent. Leon May could feel eyes watching from windows, from doorways, from the shadowed interiors of shops and saloons. But no one moved. No one spoke up. In a town like Sentinel Creek, you didn't challenge men like Cutler. You didn't interfere with Dominic Vane's business, unless you had a death wish. Cutler laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "That can be arranged, stranger. You got a name before I kill you?" "Cole Maddox." The name seemed to hang in the air. Leon May saw something shift in Cutler's expression, a flicker of recognition, maybe, or uncertainty. "Maddox," Cutler repeated slowly. "You're the one who—" "I'm the one holding this woman," Cole interrupted, "and I'm taking her to the doctor. If you got a problem with that, we can settle it right now. But I'm telling you straight, you fire another shot, and it'll be the last thing you do." Leon May's vision was starting to tunnel, dark edges creeping in. She tried to speak, to warn him, to tell him to run, but all that came out was a weak gasp. The satchel. She had to protect the satchel. Her fingers clutched at it weakly, and Cole seemed to notice. His eyes flicked down to the leather bag, then back to Cutler. "3 against 1, Cutler said, gesturing to his companions. 2 rough-looking men with dead eyes and ready guns. "You ain't that good, Maddox." "Maybe not." Cole's voice remained steady, conversational almost. "But I'm good enough that at least 2 of you won't leave this street alive. Question is, which 2? You want to find out if you're one of them?" Silence stretched like a rope about to snap. Then Cutler spat into the dust. "Mr. Vane's gonna hear about this. He don't forget, and he don't forgive. I'm counting on it." The words were barely a whisper, but Leon May heard them, felt them rumble through Cole's chest where her cheek pressed against him. There was something in those words, not bravado, but acceptance, like he'd already made peace with whatever consequences would come. Cutler yanked his horse's reins hard, making the animal rear slightly. "You just signed your death warrant, Maddox, hers too." His eyes locked on Leon May's fading gaze. "Mr. Vane wants you alive, girl. But he didn't say you had to be in one piece." Then he wheeled his horse around, and the 3 riders thundered back down the street, leaving a wake of dust and unspoken threats. The moment they disappeared from view, Cole moved. He scooped Leon May up fully into his arms, cradling her like she weighed nothing. "Stay with me," he said, his face close to hers. "You hear me? Stay with me." She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But the darkness was pulling her down, down, down into a place where pain couldn't reach. Her hand still clutched the satchel, even as consciousness slipped away. The last thing she heard before everything went black was Cole's voice, urgent now, calling out, "Doc Brennan, I need you now." And the last thing she felt was safe. When Leon May woke, the first thing she registered was pain. It radiated from her back in waves, sharp and hot and all-consuming. She tried to gasp, but something, a hand, gentle but firm, pressed against her shoulder, holding her still. "Easy," a woman's voice said. "Don't move. You're sewn up, but it's fresh. You'll tear the stitches." Leon May's eyes fluttered open. She was in a small room, clean and sparse, with whitewashed walls and a single window showing dusky evening light. The scent of carbolic acid and whiskey hung in the air. Medical smells. A clinic. The woman leaning over her was middle-aged, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. She wore a simple dress with rolled-up sleeves, her hands stained with what looked like iodine. "I'm Dr. Sarah Brennan," the woman said, answering the unspoken question. "You're in my clinic. You've been shot. The bullet went through clean, missed anything vital by about an inch. You're lucky." Lucky? Leon May almost laughed, but it came out as a weak cough that sent fresh agony through her back. "The man," she managed to whisper. "The one who—" "Cole Maddox. He's outside." Dr. Brennan dipped a cloth in cool water and pressed it gently to Leon May's forehead. "He hasn't left since he brought you in. That was 4 hours ago." 4 hours. Leon May's hand instinctively moved to her chest, searching. Panic spiked through her. "Your satchel," Dr. Brennan said quietly, producing the leather bag from beside the bed. "Cole made sure it stayed with you. Said you seemed more worried about it than the bullet hole." Relief flooded through her so intensely it almost masked the pain. The letters. They were safe. "Why?" The word came out cracked, barely audible. Dr. Brennan paused in her ministrations. "Why what?" "Why did he help me?" Leon May's eyes filled with tears she didn't have the strength to hold back. "No one helps. No one interferes, not with Vane's property." The doctor's expression hardened. "First, you're not property. You're a human being. Second, Cole Maddox isn't like most men in this territory. He's seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing. Third," she hesitated, then continued, "he lost someone once, someone he couldn't save. I think maybe he saw a chance to get it right this time." Before Leon May could respond, the door opened and Cole stepped in. He'd cleaned up some, washed the blood from his hands and face, but his shirt was still stained dark where she'd bled on him. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. "She awake?" His voice was softer than before, uncertain in a way it hadn't been when facing down Cutler. "Awake and asking about you," Dr. Brennan said with the hint of a smile. "I'll give you two a moment. But just a moment. She needs rest." She looked at Leon May. "You lost a lot of blood. You'll be weak for a while. No sudden movements." Then she left, closing the door quietly behind her. Cole stood there for a long moment, just inside the door, as if unsure whether he was allowed to come closer. His winter sky eyes studied her face with an intensity that made Leon May want to look away. But she didn't. "Thank you," she whispered. He shook his head slowly. "Don't thank me yet. Cutler's going to tell Vane what happened. They'll be back." "I know." Leon May tried to push herself up to sitting, but the pain made her gasp, and Cole was there in an instant, easing her back down with surprising gentleness. "Easy," he said, echoing the doctor's earlier words. "You're not going anywhere for a while." "I have to." Her hand clutched the satchel. "I have to get these to the territorial marshal. Evidence, proof of what Vane's done, to me, to others." Cole's jaw tightened. "What kind of proof?" "Letters, correspondence, records." The words tumbled out faster now, urgent. "He's careful, always careful, but he kept records of everything. Every bribe, every transaction, every woman brought in on false contracts. I found them in his study. I took them. I ran." Understanding dawned in Cole's eyes, along with something that looked like respect. "You didn't just run from him. You stole the one thing that could destroy him." "Yes." Leon May met his gaze. "And he'll kill me to get them back. Kill anyone who helps me. You should go before—" "I'm not going anywhere." The words were simple, but they hit Leon May like a physical force. She stared at him, searching his face for some sign of doubt, of self-preservation, of the basic human instinct to survive. She found none. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "Dominic Vane is one of the most powerful men in the territory. He has judges in his pocket, lawmen, politicians. He owns this town. He owns most of the county. If you stand against him, I've stood against worse. You'll die." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Let me tell you something about dying," he said softly. "I was at Shiloh. You know what that is?" Leon May shook her head weakly. "A battle. During the war. 23,000 casualties in 2 days. I watched friends, good men, better than me, bleed out in the mud. Watched them cry for their mothers, their wives. God. He paused, his voice catching. I survived. And for a long time after, I wondered why. Why me and not them? He looked directly at her then, and she saw something raw in his eyes, something that hadn't fully healed. I stopped wondering when I realized the answer didn't matter. What mattered was what I did with the time I had left, whether I used it for something that meant something. He reached out slowly, carefully, and placed his hand over hers where it rested on the satchel. You're doing something brave, something that could save other women from what you went through. I'd be a coward to walk away from that. Lian May felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't even know you. No, Cole agreed, but I know enough about you to know you're worth fighting for. The door opened again and Dr. Brennan stuck her head in. That's enough for now. She needs to sleep. You can keep watch if you want, Cole, but do it from the other room. Cole stood, replacing his hat on his head. But before he left, he looked back at Lian May one more time. Get some rest. When you're stronger, we'll figure out how to get those letters where they need to go. We? She whispered. We, he confirmed. And then he was gone. Lian May lay back against the thin pillow, exhaustion pulling at her like an undertow. But before sleep claimed her, she found herself thinking something she hadn't thought in 6 months. Maybe tomorrow wouldn't be so bad after all. She woke to shouting. It was deep night. She could tell by the quality of darkness beyond the window. Her back screamed with pain as she tried to sit up, but the urgency and the voices outside the room overrode her body's protests. Not leaving her here. That was Cole's voice, hard and sharp. She can't be moved. Dr. Brennan, equally forceful. She's lost too much blood. The fever's starting. If you take her out there now? If I don't, Vane's men will be here by dawn. Maybe sooner. You think they're going to care about medical considerations? Silence. Then the doctor's voice, quieter, but no less intense. Where will you take her? North. There's a cabin in the foothills. Belonged to a friend of mine. Remote. Defensible. I can keep her safe there while she heals. And then what? You can't run forever, Cole. No. But I can run long enough. Lian May managed to push herself to sitting, gritting her teeth against the pain. The satchel was still there, clutched against her chest like a lifeline. She reached for it, checking. Yes, the letters were still inside. Still safe. The door opened and Cole entered, followed by Dr. Brennan. Both stopped when they saw her sitting up. You shouldn't be, the doctor began. I heard, Lian May interrupted, her voice stronger than she felt. When do we leave? Cole and Dr. Brennan exchanged glances. Now, Cole said. If you can ride. Lian May thought about what riding would do to the fresh wound in her back. Thought about the pain, the exhaustion, the fever. She could already feel building in her blood. Then she thought about what Cutler would do if he found her here. What Vane would do. I can ride, she said. Dr. Brennan sighed heavily, but moved to a cabinet, pulling out supplies. Then let me at least dress the wound properly, and you'll take these. She handed Cole a small cloth bag. Laudanum for the pain, fever powder, clean bandages. Change the dressing twice a day, more if it bleeds through. Watch for infection, red streaking from the wound, increased fever, yellow discharge. Cole took the bag, nodding. Thank you, Sarah. Don't thank me. Just keep her alive. The doctor turned to Lian May, her expression softening. You're stronger than you look, but strength has limits. Don't push past them. 20 minutes later, Lian May found herself on a horse for the first time in months. Cole had helped her into the saddle of a sturdy mare, moving with a careful gentleness that contrasted sharply with the urgency of their departure. He'd fashioned a sling for her arm to take pressure off her back, and wrapped her in a thick coat despite the warm night. He rode beside her on a rangy buckskin gelding, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. They left Sentinel Creek through the back streets, avoiding the main road. Lian May saw curtains twitch in windows as they passed, faces briefly visible before melting back into darkness. Everyone saw. No one interfered. By the time the sun rose, they were 15 miles from town and climbing into rougher country. Pine trees began to replace the scrub brush. The air grew cooler, cleaner. Leon May's back throbbed with each step the mare took, but she clenched her jaw and stayed silent. Cole noticed anyway. "We'll rest soon," he said quietly. "There's a stream about a mile ahead. Good cover." She just nodded, not trusting her voice. They reached the stream as promised, a clear, cold ribbon of water cutting through a stand of aspen. Cole helped her down from the horse, and she nearly collapsed, her legs refusing to hold her weight. He caught her again, just like he had on the street, and for a moment they stood there, her leaning against him, both breathing hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm slowing you down." "You're not." He guided her to a fallen log and helped her sit. "You're doing better than most men would after getting shot." He moved efficiently, setting up a small camp, watering the horses, filling canteens. Leon May watched him through a haze of pain and exhaustion. He was probably in his mid-30s, she guessed, with the lean, wiry build of someone who'd spent most of his life outdoors. His movements were economical, practiced. A man who'd done this before. "How much further?" she asked when he brought her a canteen. "To the cabin? Another 6-7 hours if we push it. But we won't push it. We'll take it slow." He studied her face. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." "You're lying." Despite everything, Leon May felt a ghost of a smile touch her lips. "Yes." Cole retrieved the cloth bag Dr. Brennan had given him and measured out a small amount of laudanum into a tin cup, diluting it with water. "Drink this. It'll help." She took the cup but hesitated. "It'll make me foggy. Slow. It'll make you able to stay on that horse without passing out. That's what matters right now." She drank. The bitter taste made her grimace, but within minutes she felt the edges of the pain soften, becoming distant and dreamlike. The world took on a slightly unreal quality. Cole let her rest for an hour. Then they moved again. The landscape shifted as they climbed higher, more trees, larger rocks, the terrain becoming increasingly wild and remote. Leon May found herself drifting in and out of awareness, the laudanum and exhaustion making time elastic and strange. At one point, she realized Cole was talking to her, his voice low and steady. "Bought it with my army pay. Never thought I'd actually use it. Just wanted a place that was mine, you know? Somewhere no one could tell me what to do or who to be." A pause. "Built the cabin myself, took 2 summers, got real familiar with blisters and splinters." "Why'd you leave?" The words came out slurred. "Ghosts," Cole said simply. "Too many memories. Thought I could outrun them. Turns out you can't outrun what's inside your head." Leon May understood that better than he knew. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when the cabin finally came into view. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, a modest structure of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Simple, solid, safe. Cole helped her down from the mare and half-carried her to the porch. The door wasn't locked. Out here there was no point. Inside it was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rough table and 2 chairs occupied the center. A rope-frame bed with the straw mattress sat in the corner, covered with wool blankets that smelled of cedar and thyme. "It's not much," Cole said, sounding almost apologetic. Leon May looked around at the small cabin, at the solid walls, the sturdy door, the window with actual glass panes instead of oilcloth. She thought about the cramped quarters she'd shared with 3 other women at Vane's ranch. The constant fear. The complete lack of privacy or dignity. "It's perfect," she whispered. And then her legs gave out entirely. Cole caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her gently onto the bed. Her skin was burning now, fever rising fast despite the cool mountain air. He pulled the blankets up around her, then stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He wasn't a doctor. Wasn't even particularly good at tending his own wounds, much less someone else's. But Dr. Brennan's instructions had been clear, and he'd survived worse situations with less knowledge. The fire needed building first. The cabin had gone cold during the months he'd been away, and the evening chill was already settling in. Cole moved quickly, gathering kindling from the box near the fireplace, striking flint until sparks caught. Within minutes, flames were licking up the chimney, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Water next. He grabbed the wooden bucket from beside the door and headed to the spring he'd dug about 50 yards behind the cabin. The cold water ran clear and clean, fed by snowmelt from higher up the mountain. He filled the bucket, then paused, scanning the darkening tree line. Nothing moved. No sounds except wind in the pines and the distant cry of a hawk. But that didn't mean they were safe. Vane's men could track, and desperation made men careless. He'd have to set up some kind of early warning system before full dark. Back inside, he found Lee and May thrashing weakly in the bed, muttering in a language he didn't understand. Chinese, probably. The fever was taking hold fast. Cole hung the bucket over the fire to warm, then knelt beside the bed. Her forehead was slick with sweat despite the shivers racking her body. He needed to change the bandage, check the wound. "Lien May," he said softly, touching her shoulder. "I need to look at your back." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't." The fear in her voice made his chest tighten. She wasn't seeing him, wasn't in this cabin at all. She was somewhere else, sometime else, reliving something that made her beg. "It's Cole," he said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "You're safe. I'm just going to change your bandage, that's all." Recognition slowly filtered back into her eyes. She nodded weakly. He helped her sit up enough to remove the coat and ease her dress down from her shoulders. The bandage was soaked through with blood and seepage. He cut it away carefully with his knife, then used warm water and a clean cloth to gently wash around the wound. It looked angry, red and swollen, the stitches Dr. Brennan had put in pulling at inflamed skin. Not infected yet, but close. Too close. "This is going to hurt," he warned, reaching for the bottle of carbolic acid the doctor had packed. Lien May's hand shot out and gripped his wrist, surprisingly strong despite her weakness. "Do it," she said through gritted teeth. He did. She made no sound, but he felt her fingers dig into his arm hard enough to bruise. When he finished cleaning and rebandaging the wound, she collapsed back against the pillow, trembling. Cole pulled the blankets up around her again, then retrieved the fever powder from Dr. Brennan's supplies. He mixed it with cooled water and helped Lien May drink, supporting her head with one hand. "Sleep now," he said. "I'll keep watch." "The letters," she mumbled, already drifting. "Don't let them—" "They're safe, right here." He showed her the satchel, placed it within her reach. "I won't let anything happen to them." "Or to you," he added silently. He settled into one of the rough chairs he'd made years ago, positioned where he could see both the door and the window. His rifle lay across his lap, loaded and ready. Outside, full darkness had fallen, bringing with it the chorus of night sounds, crickets, owls, the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. Cole let his mind drift back to the war, to the long nights on picket duty, when staying awake meant staying alive. He'd learned how to exist in that space between sleep and wakefulness, alert to any change in the rhythm of the night. Hours passed. The fire burned low and he added more wood. Lien May's breathing was rough and uneven, punctuated by occasional whimpers that made his jaw clench. At one point she cried out something sharp and afraid, and he moved to her side, placing a cool cloth on her forehead. "Shh," he murmured. "You're all right. You're safe." Her hand found his in the darkness, gripping tight. "Don't leave," she whispered, half asleep. "Please don't leave me alone." "I won't," he promised, and he meant it. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the pines. Cole had dozed off somewhere around 4 in the morning, jerking awake at every small sound. Now, stiff and sore from the chair, he stretched and checked on Lien May. Her fever had broken sometime during the night. She slept more peacefully now, her breathing steady and deep. The color had returned to her face, replacing the grayish pallor that had scared him more than he wanted to admit. He slipped outside quietly, rifle in hand, and made a circuit of the clearing. The horses were fine, grazing on the sparse grass near the tree line where he'd picketed them last night. No tracks that shouldn't be there, no signs of visitors, but they'd come eventually. He had no illusions about that. Cole spent the morning setting up simple alarms around the perimeter, string attached to small bells, placed at the most likely approach routes. Not sophisticated, but effective enough to give warning. Then he checked the cabin's defenses, noting weak points in the walls where rifle fire could penetrate, identifying the best positions for a last stand if it came to that. He hoped it wouldn't, but hope wasn't a strategy. When he returned to the cabin around midday, Lien May was awake. She'd managed to sit up, though the effort clearly cost her. The satchel was open beside her, letters spread across the blanket like damning evidence at a trial. "You should be resting," Cole said, setting his rifle by the door. "I've rested enough." Her voice was weak but determined. "We need a plan. The plan is to keep you alive until you're strong enough to travel. Then we get these letters to someone who can actually do something with them." He moved to the fireplace, started preparing a simple meal: hardtack soaked in water, dried beef, coffee. Not much, but it would keep them going. "The territorial marshal is in Helena," Lian May said. "That's over 100 miles from here, maybe more, through country vein controls." "I know. He'll have men watching the roads, every town, every way station. The moment we show ourselves—" "I know," Cole repeated more gently. He brought her a cup of coffee, helped her take it without spilling. "But we're not going to show ourselves. Not yet." She looked at him over the rim of the cup, steam rising between them. "What do you mean?" "Vane thinks we're running, thinks we're scared. Maybe we should let him keep thinking that." Cole settled into the chair across from her, cradling his own coffee. "Let him spread his men thin, searching. Let him get frustrated, make mistakes. Meanwhile, we wait, we prepare. And when the time's right, we move fast and we don't stop until those letters are in the right hands." Lian May was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those dark, intelligent eyes. "You've done this before," she said finally. "Not this exactly, but you've fought when the odds were against you. More times than I can count." Cole took a sip of coffee, bitter and strong. "War teaches you that the side with the most men doesn't always win. Sometimes it's about patience, about choosing your moment. And if Vane finds us before we're ready, then we make him regret it." The simple certainty in his voice seemed to steady something in her. She nodded slowly, then looked down at the letters scattered across the bed. "These names," she said quietly. "Some of these women, I knew them, shared rooms with them, talked with them. Where are they now?" Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered the papers. "Dead. Most of them. The ones who tried to leave, who fought back, who broke the rules." She looked up, and Cole saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "There was a girl, couldn't have been more than 17. Sarah. She reminded me of my sister. When she tried to run, Vane made an example of her, made us all watch." Cole felt rage building in his chest, cold and sharp. "Tell me. Why?" Lian May's voice broke slightly. "Why do you want to know?" "Because when we face him, and we will face him eventually, I want to remember exactly what kind of man he is. I want to remember why pulling the trigger is the right thing to do." She was quiet for a long time, staring at nothing. Then, slowly, she began to speak. "Vane runs it like a business. He has agents in San Francisco, Seattle, even as far as Boston. They find young women, immigrants mostly, but not always, women with no family, no prospects. They promise good jobs, respectable work, housekeeping, cooking, teaching. They even provide contracts, official-looking papers. Some women like me believe it because they want to believe it, because the alternative is starvation, or worse." Cole listened, his coffee forgotten. "When we arrive, everything changes. The contracts have clauses, debt for passage, for room and board, for training. Suddenly we owe thousands of dollars. And there's only one way to work it off." Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. Survival talk. "Some women go along, break eventually. Others fight. Sarah fought." "What did he do to her?" "Beat her, starved her, locked her in a cellar for a week. When she still wouldn't comply, he took her out to the barn, tied her to a post, and whipped her in front of everyone. 20 lashes. She died 3 days later from infection." Cole's knuckles had gone white around his coffee cup. "And the law did nothing?" Lian May laughed, bitter and hollow. "The sheriff is on Vane's payroll, the judge too, even the territorial representative. It's all in the letters, names, amounts, dates. Vane documented everything because he never thought anyone would be brave enough or stupid enough to steal from him. You were both." I was desperate. She met his eyes. "I woke up one morning and realized I had 2 choices. Find a way to stop him, or find a way to die that didn't hurt too much. I chose the first option. Barely. Cole stood abruptly and moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful clearing. The contrast between the tranquil forest and the horror she'd described made him feel slightly sick. How many? He asked quietly. How many women has he done this to? The letters document at least 40 over the past 5 years, but I think there are more. Women who never made it into the official records. Women who just disappeared. 40 lives destroyed. 40 families who would never know what happened to their daughters, their sisters, and one man responsible for all of it, walking around free and powerful while his victims rotted in unmarked graves or lived in daily torment. Cole turned back to face her. We're going to make this right, he said, and it wasn't a promise. It was a fact. Every woman in those letters, every name, every story, they're going to matter. They're going to be heard. By who? Leon May's voice held equal parts hope and despair. Even if we reach the marshal, even if he believes us, Vane has influence all the way to Washington. He's not just some frontier criminal. He's connected. Then we'll find someone bigger. Cole moved back to the chair, sat down with purpose. There are federal marshals who don't answer to territorial officials, newspaper reporters who'd kill for a story this big. Someone, somewhere, gives a damn about justice. We just have to find them. Leon May was quiet, but something in her expression had shifted. The hopelessness was still there, but it was being challenged by something else. Something harder. You really believe that? She asked. That justice exists for people like me? I believe that justice exists if we fight hard enough to make it exist. She studied his face for a long moment, then slowly smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but real. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish. Probably both. Cole returned the smile. Now, you need to eat something. Can't fight empires on an empty stomach. He prepared the hardtack and beef, softening the bread in warm water until it was palatable. Leon May ate slowly, each bite clearly requiring effort, but she finished everything he gave her. The color continued to return to her face, and by evening she was able to stand on her own, though she leaned heavily on the table for support. I need to move, she said when Cole suggested she rest again. If I stay in that bed any longer, I'll lose what strength I have. So he let her walk, slowly, from the bed to the table and back, 5 steps each way. It took her 20 minutes to make the circuit 3 times, and by the end she was sweating and pale, but there was satisfaction in her eyes. Tomorrow I'll do 10, she said, collapsing back onto the bed. Tomorrow you'll do whatever your body can handle. No more, no less. She made a face at him but didn't argue. The days fell into a rhythm. Cole would wake before dawn, check the perimeter, tend to the horses. Leon May would wake shortly after, her body responding to the rising sun in ways that spoke of a lifetime of early mornings and hard work. Together they'd share coffee and whatever simple meal Cole could prepare. Then she'd practice walking while he reinforced their defenses or hunted for fresh meat. Afternoons were spent planning. They studied the letters together, identifying the most damaging evidence, memorizing key names and dates in case something happened to the documents. Leon May had a sharp mind, Cole discovered. She could recall details with photographic precision, and her understanding of Vane's operation was encyclopedic. He keeps 2 sets of books, she explained one afternoon, pointing to a particularly dense letter. The official ledgers show legitimate land purchases and cattle sales, but these letters reference payments that don't appear anywhere in the public records. Look, here he's paying Senator Whitmore $5,000 for consulting services. That same week, a land bill passed that gave Vane access to mineral rights he'd been fighting for. Cole whistled low. That's not just corruption, that's conspiracy at the territorial level. It gets worse. She pulled out another letter. This one's to a judge in Wyoming. Vane is paying him to dismiss any complaints filed by women in his employ. Calls them hysterical and unreliable witnesses. Does it name the judge? Charles Harrigan. He presided over 3 separate cases in the past 2 years where women tried to take legal action against Vane. All 3 cases were dismissed without trial. Cole felt his anger building again, but he kept it controlled, channeled it into focus. Anger was useless unless it drove action. This is enough, he said quietly. This is more than enough to bring federal charges. We just need to get it to someone who can't be bought. Does such a person exist? They better. Otherwise, this whole country's more broken than I thought. In the evenings, after the planning was done and the light had faded too much to read by, they'd sit by the fire and talk. Not about Vane or the letters or the danger hunting them, just talk. Cole learned that Lian Mei had come from Guangdong province, one of 6 children in a family that could barely feed 3. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise them alone. At 18, Lian Mei had answered an advertisement for domestic workers in America. Good pay, respectable work, a chance to send money home. I wrote to my mother for the first 3 months, she said quietly, staring into the flames. Told her everything was wonderful, that I was working in a nice house for a kind family. I didn't want her to worry. Didn't want her to know I'd sailed halfway around the world to become a slave. Did she write back? Lian Mei shook her head. Letters from America cost too much to send, and even if she could afford it, she probably can't read them. My sister could, maybe, if she learned, but I'll never know. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They think I'm living a good life. They think I made something of myself. Cole wanted to say something comforting, but anything he could think of sounded hollow, so instead he said, "When this is over, you'll write to them again. Tell them the truth. They deserve to know who their daughter really is, not some fantasy, but a woman brave enough to stand up to a monster." She looked at him then, firelight catching in her eyes. "You have a habit of saying things that make me want to believe the impossible." "Good. Possible's overrated anyway." She laughed, and it was the first real laugh he'd heard from her. The sound did something to his chest, made it feel lighter and heavier at the same time. Lian Mei learned about Cole in pieces too, how he'd grown up in Virginia, youngest of 3 boys. How his brothers had died in the war, one at Gettysburg, one at Antietam. How his mother had passed the winter after the war ended and his father had followed 6 months later. "Broken heart," Cole said simply. "Doc called it pneumonia, but I knew better." "So you came west?" "Came west because I couldn't stand being in a place where every corner reminded me of ghosts. Thought maybe out here, with enough space and distance, I could forget." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up. "Turns out geography doesn't work that way." "No," Lian Mei agreed softly. "It doesn't. But you make peace with it eventually. The ghosts, they never leave, but they get quieter. And some days you can even be grateful for them, because they remind you that you loved something once, that you were part of something that mattered." She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "I was engaged once, back home, to a boy from our village. Good family, decent prospects. We were supposed to marry the spring I turned 19. What happened? My father died. The family couldn't afford a dowry. His parents called it off." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd make my own way. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if—" "Don't," Cole said gently. "That road leads nowhere good. I've walked it enough times to know." "You're right." She looked at him with something like gratitude. "It's just hard sometimes, not to wonder about the life I didn't get to live. Then wonder about the life you're going to live instead. Once this is finished, once you're free. I don't know what that looks like. Neither do I. But maybe that's the beauty of it." On the 5th night, Lian Mei's fever returned with a vengeance. Cole woke to find her thrashing in the bed, burning up and delirious. The wound had finally become infected despite his best efforts, angry red streaks radiating from the stitches. He worked through the night, applying hot compresses, dosing her with fever powder and willow bark tea, cleaning the wound again and again with carbolic acid, while she screamed and fought him with surprising strength. At one point, she grabbed his shirt and pulled him close, eyes wild and unseeing. "Please," she begged in Chinese, then switching to broken English. "Please, no more, please. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. Lian Mei, it's Cole. You're safe. You're—" But she couldn't hear him. She was lost in some nightmare that had nothing to do with the cabin, or the mountain, or the wound in her back. By dawn, he was exhausted and terrified. She'd gone still, her breathing so shallow he had to put his hand on her chest to feel it. The infection was winning. Without proper medical supplies, without Dr. Brennan's expertise, he was losing her. Cole made a decision he'd been avoiding. There was a small settlement about 15 miles east, barely a town, just a trading post and a handful of buildings. But there'd be supplies. Maybe even someone with medical knowledge. It was a risk, but watching Lian Mei slip away was a greater one. He left at first light, pushing his horse hard, the pack horse trailing behind. The settlement was called Pine Ridge, and it was exactly as forgettable as he'd remembered. A dozen buildings scattered along a rutted dirt road, most looking like a strong wind could knock them over. The trading post was run by a grizzled old man named Horace who'd lost an arm at Petersburg and didn't much care for conversation. Cole bought what he needed: more carbolic acid, clean bandages, laudanum, a bottle of whiskey for good measure, then asked the question he'd been dreading. "Anyone around here know medicine? Doctor? Healer? Anything?" Horace squinted at him with his one good eye. "Mrs. Chen lives about 2 miles north. Ain't a real doctor, but she's patched up more bullet holes and knife wounds than most sawbones. Why?" "Friend of mine's got an infected wound, bad. She'll want pain." Cole pulled out more coins than he could afford. "That a problem?" "Not for me." Horace pocketed the money. "But you might want to know, some of Vane's men came through here yesterday, asking questions about a Chinese woman and whoever's helping her, offering reward money." Cole's blood went cold. "What'd you tell him?" "Told him I ain't seen nothing, same as I'll tell anyone else who asks." Horace met his eyes steadily. "I don't much care for men who hunt women, and I care even less for Dominic Vane, so you and your friend keep your heads down and I'll keep my mouth shut." "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just don't bring trouble to my door." Cole found Mrs. Chen's place exactly where Horace said it would be. A small, neat cabin with a vegetable garden and chickens scratching in the yard. She was a tiny woman, couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall, with iron gray hair and hands that moved with surgical precision. She listened to his description of the wound and the infection without interrupting. Then she packed a bag and followed him back to Pine Ridge without asking a single question about who or why. They rode back to the cabin together, not speaking. Cole's mind was racing with possibilities, worst-case scenarios. If Vane's men were already searching this close to the mountain, they didn't have much time. When they reached the cabin, he helped Mrs. Chen down from her horse and led her inside. Lian Mei was exactly as he'd left her, still, pale, barely breathing. The older woman moved to the bedside immediately, pulling back the blankets and examining the wound with practiced efficiency. She made a small sound of disapproval, then looked at Cole. "How long has she been like this?" "The fever came back last night, got worse through the early morning." "And you've been treating it how?" Cole described everything he'd done. Mrs. Chen nodded, neither approving nor condemning. Then she opened her bag and got to work. What followed was 2 hours of careful, methodical care. She reopened part of the wound, draining infection that Cole's stomach turned. She applied poultices made from herbs he didn't recognize, muttering to herself in Chinese. She forced bitter teas between Lian Mei's lips, massaging her throat to make her swallow. And slowly, incrementally, color began to return to Lian Mei's face. By afternoon, the fever had broken again. Lian Mei opened her eyes, confused and weak but present. When she saw Mrs. Chen, she spoke in rapid Chinese, her voice cracking with emotion. The older woman responded in the same language, her tone gentle and soothing. Then she turned to Cole. "She'll live, but she needs rest. Real rest. No more walking around trying to prove she's strong. No more pushing herself, at least a week of lying still and letting the body heal." "We might not have a week," Cole said quietly. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. "Then you'd better find one. Because if she tries to run now, that wound will reopen and she'll bleed out before you make it 5 miles. Is that clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She stood, gathering her things. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. Keep her warm, keep her hydrated, and keep the wound clean. And next time you need to play doctor, don't wait so long before getting help." Cole paid her more than she asked for, and she didn't refuse it. As he walked her to her horse, she paused and looked back at the cabin. "She told me what she's running from," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "What those letters contain. You're a brave man to stand with her, or a foolish one." "I've been told both." "Well, whichever you are, don't get her killed. That girl has already survived more than most people could endure. She deserves a chance at something better." "I know." Mrs. Chen mounted her horse with surprising agility for her age. "One more thing. The men asking questions in Pine Ridge, they're not going to give up. Vane doesn't strike me as the forgiving type." "He's not." "Then watch yourself. And watch her. Because the next time might not end with just questions. She rode off, leaving Cole standing in the clearing with the weight of those words settling on his shoulders like snow. Inside, Leon May was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Cole settled back into his chair by the fire, rifle across his lap, and prepared for another long night of watching. But this time, he allowed himself a small measure of hope. She was alive. She was fighting, and as long as she kept fighting, he'd keep standing between her and anyone who tried to stop her. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of weather changing. Cole checked his rifle one more time, then settled in to wait for whatever came next. The weather changed 3 days later, just as Mrs. Chen had predicted. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, heavy and threatening, turning the afternoon sky the color of old bruises. Cole stood on the porch, watching the storm approach, feeling the temperature drop with each gust of wind that bent the pines. Inside, Leon May was finally strong enough to sit up without assistance. Her color had returned fully, and though she still moved carefully to avoid aggravating the healing wound, there was determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The kind of determination that came from surviving something that should have killed you. "Storm's coming," Cole said, stepping back inside and closing the door against the rising wind. Leon May looked up from the letters she'd been organizing. "How bad?" "Bad enough. We'll be stuck here for a day or two at least." He moved to the fireplace, adding more wood. "Could work in our favor, though. Hard to track someone in a downpour. Or it could trap us here if Vane's men get close." She set the papers aside, wrapping a blanket more tightly around her shoulders. "Have you heard anything? Seen anything?" "Nothing since Pine Ridge, but that doesn't mean they've given up." Cole settled into his chair, the rifle always within reach. "Mrs. Chen came by this morning while you were sleeping. Said the reward's gone up. $500 for information leading to your capture, dead or alive." Leon May's face paled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "That's more than most people see in 2 years." "Yeah." Cole's jaw tightened. "Makes desperate men even more desperate." The first drops of rain hit the roof like bullets, scattered at first, then building to a steady drumming that filled the cabin with white noise. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed seconds later by the low rumble of thunder. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm. There was something almost peaceful about it. The cabin warm and dry, the fire crackling, the world outside reduced to water and wind. For a moment, Cole could almost forget they were being hunted. Almost. "Tell me about Virginia," Leon May said suddenly. "Before the war, what was it like?" Cole looked at her, surprised. She rarely asked about his past, seemed to understand that some doors were better left closed, but maybe she needed the distraction as much as he did. "Green," he said finally. Everything was green. Not like here, not pine and mountain green, but rolling hills covered in grass and oak trees. My family had a farm, nothing fancy. Grew tobacco mostly, some corn. Had a big house with a porch that wrapped all the way around. My mother used to sit out there in the evenings shelling peas and watching the sun go down. Sounds beautiful. It was. The memories came easier than he expected, softened by time and distance. My brothers and I, we'd finish our chores and then we'd have these wars in the creek behind the house. Build forts out of mud and rocks, have battles that lasted until dark. My oldest brother James, he always won. He was bigger, smarter. But my middle brother Thomas, he never gave up. No matter how many times James beat him, he'd come back the next day ready to try again. "Which one were you?" "The one who kept score." Cole smiled despite himself. "I was the youngest. Couldn't beat either of them in a straight fight, so I learned to be strategic. Set traps, form alliances, wait for the right moment to strike." "Sounds like you were preparing for war even then." The smile faded. "Maybe. Or maybe war just takes what's already there and twists it into something useful, something ugly." Rain lashed against the windows now, driven by wind that howled through the pines like something wounded and angry. Another flash of lightning, closer this time, bright enough to leave after images. The thunder that followed shook the walls. "I'm scared," Leon May said quietly, and the admission seemed to cost her something. Not of the storm, of what comes after, of failing, of all those women, all those names in the letters, staying just names, just numbers in Vane's records. Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're not going to fail. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know you. And I know that you didn't survive 6 months of hell, steal evidence from one of the most dangerous men in the territory, and take a bullet in the back just to give up now. You're stronger than you think you are. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified. Good. At her surprised look, he continued. Fear means you understand what's at stake. Means you're taking this seriously. The men who aren't afraid are either fools or liars, and neither one lasts long when things get hard. She studied him in the firelight, her dark eyes reflecting the flames. You're afraid too, aren't you? Every damn day. Of dying? Of failing? Of letting you down? Of getting this far, and still not making a difference. He paused, then added more quietly, of losing someone else I care about. The words hung between them, heavier than the storm raging outside. Lian May's expression shifted, something vulnerable and uncertain crossing her face. Cole? A sharp crack split the air, distinct even over the storm's roar. Not thunder, gunfire. Cole was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window. Get down, he ordered, and Lian May dropped to the floor without hesitation, pulling the satchel with her. Through the rain-streaked glass, Cole saw movement at the tree line, shadows that didn't belong to the forest. 4, maybe 5 men, spreading out to surround the cabin. They'd found them. How many? Lian May's voice was steady, despite the fear he knew she must be feeling. At least 4. Maybe more. Cole moved to the other window, checking the angles. They're trying to box us in. Another shot, this one slamming into the wall near the window. Cole ducked back, his mind racing through options. The cabin was defensible, but not a fortress. The walls were thick enough to stop most rifle rounds, but sustained fire would punch through eventually. And if they tried to burn them out... There's a root cellar, he said, thinking fast. Trapdoor under the rug by the bed. It leads to a tunnel that comes out about 30 yards into the woods. Old escape route I dug in case I ever needed it. You dug a tunnel? Long story. Point is, you can get out. Take the horses, take the letters, and ride hard for Helena. Don't stop. Don't look back. Lian May stared at him. What about you? I'll hold them here. Buy you time. No! She shook her head emphatically. We go together or not at all? Lian May about... No! She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in with desperate strength. I didn't survive everything I've survived just to let you die for me. We fight together. We run together. We live or die together. Another volley of shots peppered the cabin, wood splintering. A window shattered, glass exploding inward. The storm and the gunfire created a chaos of sound that made thinking difficult. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. She meant it, every word. Together then, he said. But if I tell you to run, you run. Deal? If you tell me to run, you better be right beside me. Deal? Despite everything, he almost smiled. Deal. They moved quickly. Cole grabbed ammunition, his revolver, the saddlebags with their remaining supplies. Lian May secured the letters in the satchel, strapping it across her body. She moved slower than she wanted to, he could tell, the wound still limiting her, but she didn't complain. Cole pulled back the rug, revealing the trapdoor. He hauled it open, exposing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. I'll go first. You follow. Move quiet and move fast. He dropped down into the cellar, landing in a crouch. The space was small, dirt-walled, smelling of earth and old potatoes. The tunnel entrance was exactly where he'd left it, a dark mouth leading into the mountain. Lian May descended carefully, favoring her injured side. When she reached the bottom, Cole pulled the trapdoor closed above them, plunging them into near-total darkness. The sounds of the storm and the gunfire became muffled, distant. Stay close, he whispered. The tunnel's narrow, but it's reinforced. Just keep one hand on the wall and follow me. They moved through the darkness, Cole leading with one hand outstretched, feeling his way. The tunnel was barely wide enough for his shoulders, the ceiling low enough that he had to hunch. Behind him, he could hear Lian May's breathing, rapid but controlled. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only minutes, fresh air hit his face. The exit. Cole pushed aside the camouflaged covering, branches, and old boards, and emerged into the storm-lashed forest. Rain immediately soaked him to the skin, cold and driving. He helped Leon May out, then quickly replaced the covering. Through the trees, he could see the cabin. Men were advancing on it now, firing steadily. They'd realize soon that their targets had fled. "The horses!" Leon May gasped. "Where are they?" Cole had picketed them on the far side of the clearing away from the cabin. They'd have to circle around, staying in the trees, avoiding detection. In this storm, with visibility down to almost nothing, it was possible, barely. "Follow me. Stay low. If shooting starts, drop flat and don't move until I tell you." They made their way through the forest, using the storm as cover. The rain was so heavy it was like moving through a waterfall, every step treacherous on the slick ground. Lightning flashed, turning the world stark white for frozen seconds before plunging it back into darkness. Cole could see the horses now, huddled together against the weather, ears flat, 50 yards, 40, 30. Behind them, shouts erupted from the cabin. They'd discovered the escape route. "Go!" Cole pushed Leon May forward, running now. "Go! Go! Go!" They burst from the tree line. Cole reached his horse first, swinging into the saddle even as rifle fire cracked through the storm. Leon May struggled with her mare, her wounded back making mounting difficult. Cole rode close, grabbed her arm, and hauled her up with a strength born of pure adrenaline. Then they were moving, crashing through the forest at a dead run, branches whipping past, the storm making everything a blur of rain and darkness and speed. Behind them, more gunfire. A bullet whined past Cole's ear, so close he felt the heat of it. "Stay low," he shouted over the storm. "Don't slow down." The forest was a nightmare at this pace. Fallen logs appearing out of nowhere, low branches threatening to sweep them from the saddle, the ground treacherous with mud and hidden roots. But they couldn't slow down. Not with Vane's men behind them, not with $500 on Leon May's head. They rode for what felt like hours but couldn't have been more than 30 minutes. The storm showed no signs of abating, and the darkness was near absolute. Finally, Cole pulled his horse to a halt in a small ravine, using the high banks for cover. Leon May drew up beside him, her mare blowing hard. In the lightning flashes, Cole could see her face, pale, drawn with pain, but set with determination. "You hurt?" he asked. "Wound opened a little. I'll manage." She pressed a hand to her back, and when she pulled it away, Cole saw blood on her fingers even in the dim light. "Did we lose them?" "For now, but they'll pick up the trail once the storm clears." Cole scanned the darkness, trying to orient himself. They'd ridden roughly northeast, away from Pine Ridge, deeper into territory he didn't know well. "We need to keep moving, put as much distance as we can between us and them before dawn." "Where are we going?" Good question. Helena was still over 100 miles away through country that Vane controlled. Going back to Pine Ridge was out of the question. The cabin was compromised. They had limited supplies, no shelter, and Leon May was injured again. "North," Cole decided. "There's mining country up in the mountains. Boom towns that come and go too fast for Vane to control. We can lose ourselves there, maybe find someone heading to Helena who'd take mail. Get the letters where they need to go without putting ourselves in the open." Leon May nodded, though he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "How far?" 2 days hard riding, maybe 3. "Then we better get started." They rode through the night, the storm gradually weakening but never fully breaking. Dawn came gray and miserable, the sun hidden behind heavy clouds. Cole kept them to game trails and creek beds, avoiding anything that looked like a road. The going was slow and difficult, but it reduced the chances of being spotted. Around mid-morning, they stopped to rest the horses and check Leon May's wound. It had bled more than Cole liked, soaking through her dress and the makeshift bandage beneath. Her face was drawn tight with pain she refused to acknowledge. "Let me look," he said, and she didn't argue. That worried him more than anything else. The stitches had torn in 2 places, not badly, but enough to need attention. Cole cleaned and rebandaged the wound as best he could with their limited supplies, working quickly while Leon May bit down on a piece of leather to keep from crying out. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I know it hurts." "Just finish," she managed through gritted teeth. When he was done, she slumped against a tree, breathing hard. Cole sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved away. Back at the cabin, Leon May said after a while, her voice quiet. What you said about caring about me. Did you mean it? Cole was silent for a long moment, watching water drip from the branches overhead. Yeah, he said finally. I meant it. Why? She turned to look at him. You barely know me. I'm just some woman you found bleeding in the street. Someone else's problem that you made your own for reasons I still don't understand. You're not a problem, and I know you better than you think. Cole met her gaze. I know you're brave enough to steal from a monster. I know you'd rather die than let other women suffer what you suffered. I know you fight through pain that would drop most men. I know you're loyal, smart, stubborn as hell, and you make me want to be better than I am. Leon May's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears. Cole, and I know, he continued softly, that somewhere along the way this stopped being about doing the right thing and started being about keeping you safe. Because the thought of anything happening to you makes me feel like I'm back at Shiloh, watching people I care about die and not being able to stop it. She reached out, her hand finding his. Their fingers intertwined, rough calluses against smooth skin. I care about you too, she whispered. I didn't want to. Caring about people means you can lose them, but I couldn't help it. Cole raised their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was gentle, reverent. Then I guess we better make sure we both survive this. Because I'd like to see what happens when we're not running for our lives. She smiled, small and fragile but real. I'd like that too. They sat there for a few more minutes, hands clasped, drawing strength from each other. Then Cole stood, helping her to her feet. Ready to keep going? With you? Always. They rode on through the gray afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they climbed higher into the mountains. The forests here were denser, older, the trees towering giants that blocked out most of the remaining light. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of snow from the peaks above. Cole kept them moving at a steady pace, balancing speed with the need to conserve the horse's strength. They'd need these animals to last for days yet, and a lame horse this far from civilization could be a death sentence. As evening approached, Cole spotted smoke in the distance. Not a forest fire, too controlled, too deliberate, a camp or a settlement. He pulled up, considering. Could be miners, he said, or could be Vane's men. Leon May studied the smoke. Only one way to find out. We could go around. We need supplies and information. If there are people up here, they might know the territory better than we do. She looked at him. Besides, we can't run from every shadow. Eventually, we have to take a chance. She was right, and Cole knew it. They approached carefully, following the smoke to its source. What they found was a mining camp, half a dozen rough cabins clustered around a creek, with equipment scattered everywhere. Sluice boxes, pans, picks, all the detritus of men chasing gold. A man emerged from one of the cabins as they rode up. He was in his 50s, built like a barrel, with a thick beard gone mostly to gray. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip, but his expression was more curious than threatening. Help you folks? His accent marked him as Irish, the words rolling with the lilt of County Cork. Cole kept his hands visible, non-threatening. Looking for a place to camp for the night, maybe trade for some supplies if you have any to spare. The man's eyes flicked to Leon May, taking in her obvious exhaustion and the way she held herself carefully. That one looks hurt. Hunting accident, Cole lied smoothly. We're heading to Helena, got turned around in the storm. Helena's a fair piece from here. 2-3 days, depending on weather and how hard you push. The man studied them for another long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. Name's Patrick Donnelly. This here's my claim and my crew. You can camp here tonight, but I'll be wanting some answers about who you really are and what you're really running from. Cole tensed, but Donnelly held up a hand. Peace, friend. I ain't the law, and I ain't interested in anyone else's troubles. But I don't let strangers bed down near my men without knowing something about them. Fair's fair. It was reasonable, and Cole was too tired to argue. Fair enough. I'm Cole Maddox. This is Leon May. And you're right, we are running. From a man named Dominic Vane. Recognition flashed in Donnelly's eyes, followed by something that looked like satisfaction. Vane, is it? Well then, you're more than welcome here. Any enemy of that bastard is a friend of mine. He gestured toward one of the larger cabins. Come on, get yourselves dry and fed, and then you can tell me why one of the territory's richest men wants you dead. Over venison stew and strong coffee, they told their story. Cole watched Donnelly's face as Lee and May explained about the letters, the women, the corruption that reached all the way to the territorial government. The Irishman's expression grew darker with each revelation. I've heard stories, Donnelly said when she finished. Men talk in saloons, you know. Whispers about women disappearing, about Vane's ranch being someplace decent women don't come back from. But whispers don't mean much without proof. We have proof, Lee and May said, touching the satchel. Names, dates, amounts, everything. Donnelly nodded slowly. Then you need to get that proof to someone who'll use it. Marshall in Helena's honest, from what I hear. Federal man, answers to Washington, not to territorial politicians. If anyone can bring Vane down, it's him. That's the plan, Cole said. If we can get there alive. How many men does Vane have hunting you? Don't know for sure, at least 4 at the cabin. Could be more by now. Donnelly stroked his beard thoughtfully. I've got 6 men here. Good men. Everyone. We've been planning to head into Helena ourselves come week's end. Winter's coming, and the claim's about played out. We could ride together. Safety in numbers, and Vane's men would think twice about attacking a group this size. Cole and Lee and May exchanged glances. It was more help than they'd dared hope for. Why? Cole asked. Why risk your men for strangers? Donnelly's eyes went distant, sad. Because 10 years ago, my daughter answered an advertisement for domestic work in California. Promised good wages, respectable employment. We needed the money. The farm back in Ireland had failed. We were barely getting by here in America. So we let her go. He paused, swallowing hard. Never saw her again. Got a letter 6 months later saying she'd died of fever. But I never believed it. And now, hearing your story, maybe I finally know what really happened to my Bridget. The cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fire. I'm sorry, Lee and May said softly. If there's any mention of her in the letters, don't matter now. She's gone, and no amount of justice will bring her back. Donnelly's jaw set in a hard line. But maybe it'll stop it happening to someone else's daughter. And maybe that's enough. They left at first light, a group of 9 riders moving through the mountain trails with purpose. Donnelly's men were rough but capable, the kind of hard-worn individuals who'd survived the worst of the frontier and come out stronger for it. They rode with weapons ready, eyes scanning the forest, professional in their wariness. Cole found himself relaxing slightly for the first time in days. With this many people, the odds had shifted. Not in their favor necessarily. Vane had money and men and reach beyond anything this small group could match. But at least now, if it came to a fight, it would be a fight with a chance of winning. Lee and May rode beside him, still moving carefully but stronger than she'd been. The wound was healing again, slower this time, but healing nonetheless. Every so often, their eyes would meet, and something unspoken would pass between them, a connection forged in fire and flight, in fear and faith. On the second day out from the mining camp, they crested a ridge and saw Helena spread out in the valley below. It wasn't large as cities went, maybe 3,000 souls, but it was civilization, order, law, safety, or so they hoped. We'll camp here tonight, Donnelly announced. Go into town tomorrow morning, fresh and alert. The marshal's office is on Main Street. Can't miss it. We'll go with you. Make sure you get there safe. That night, sitting around the campfire with the miners swapping stories and sharing whiskey, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite hope. He was too experienced to trust hope, but something close to it. A sense that maybe, just maybe, they might actually pull this off. Lian Mei sat beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. Their shoulders touched, and neither moved away. When the stories died down and men began drifting off to sleep, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Cole wrapped his arm around her, careful of her wound. "We're not done yet." "I know, but even if something goes wrong tomorrow, I want you to know. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope. And maybe the beginning of something that could be love." Cole's breath caught. He turned to look at her, seeing his own feelings reflected in her eyes. "Maybe?" he asked softly. She smiled. Definitely. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, tasting smoke and coffee and possibility. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow we finish this. Together. Together. But dawn brought something they hadn't anticipated. As the sun broke over the mountains, flooding the valley with golden light, one of Donnelly's men came running from where he'd been keeping watch. "Riders," he gasped, "coming up the valley road, at least a dozen, maybe more, and they're flying Vane's colors." The cemetery sat on a wind-scarred hill 3 miles outside of Grafton, a town large enough to have both a telegraph office and a territorial courthouse. Weathered headstones leaned at odd angles like broken teeth, some so old the names had worn away to shadow and suggestion. Wild grass grew thick between the graves, and a rusted iron fence surrounded the whole sorry plot. This was where Marcus Webb had been buried 6 months ago, and where, according to the final letter in Leon May's satchel, he'd hidden the original ledgers that would corroborate everything in Vane's correspondence. Cole stood at the cemetery gate, scanning the surrounding terrain with the practiced eye of a man who'd survived too many ambushes to walk blindly into another. The town lay below them, smoke rising from morning cook-fires, the streets just beginning to stir with activity. Behind them, the land rolled away in gentle hills dotted with sage and juniper. Too open. Too exposed. Every instinct screamed trap. "We should have come at night," Leon May said quietly beside him. She'd recovered enough to ride, though Cole could see the tightness around her eyes that meant she was still in pain. The wound had healed cleaner than he'd dared hope, but 3 weeks wasn't enough time to fully mend from a bullet hole. "At night we can't see who's waiting for us," Cole replied. "At least in daylight we know what we're facing." "And what are we facing?" Cole pointed to a small grove of cottonwoods about 200 yards to the east. "There's a glint there, sun on metal. Either a rifle barrel or a belt buckle, and I'm not inclined to bet on buckles." He shifted his gaze to a rocky outcrop north of the cemetery. "Movement there, too. Could be wind in the brush, but I don't think so." Leon May's hand moved instinctively to the satchel strapped across her chest. In the weeks since the cabin, the leather had become as much a part of her as her own skin. "They knew we'd come here." Of course they did. Webb was Vane's accountant before he grew a conscience. Vane knows exactly what Webb had, and where he might have hidden it. Cole checked his rifle, then the revolver at his hip. "Question is, how many men did he bring?" "Does it matter?" "Always matters. Knowing the odds helps you plan." "And what's the plan?" Cole was quiet for a moment, studying the cemetery with the calculating detachment he'd learned at Shiloh. The gate opened onto a central path that led to a small stone chapel, long abandoned and missing half its roof. Webb's grave would be somewhere in the newer section, where the stones still had sharp edges and readable names. "The plan," he said slowly, "is we don't give them what they expect. They're set up for us to ride in, dig up the grave, and try to ride out. Crossfire from multiple positions, probably. Take us down before we can get clear." "So what do we do?" Cole turned to face her fully. What he was about to propose went against every protective instinct he'd developed over the past weeks. But protecting her meant getting those ledgers to the federal marshal in Helena, and that meant taking risks. "You go in alone," he said. Leon May's eyes widened. "What?" "Listen to me. They're expecting both of us. They want you alive. You're the one who stole the letters. You're the witness. But me? I'm expendable. An obstacle to remove." He pointed to the rocky outcrop. "I'll circle around, come at them from behind. Create enough chaos that their attention splits. While they're dealing with me, you get to Webb's grave, dig up whatever he buried, and get back to the horses." "That's not a plan. That's suicide." "It's the only play we have that doesn't end with both of us dead or captured." Cole met her eyes steadily. "Vane needs you alive to find out if you told anyone else about the letters. That gives you an advantage. Use it. By walking into an ambush alone? By making them think you're surrendering. That you're scared, desperate, willing to trade the letters for your life." He touched her shoulder gently. "They'll believe it because they want to believe it. Because men like Vane can't imagine a woman brave enough to stand against them, let alone smart enough to outthink them." Leon May was quiet for a long moment. Her jaw set in that way Cole had learned meant she was turning something over in her mind, examining it from every angle. Finally, she said, "If you die doing this, then you take those ledgers and you ride like hell for Helena. You find Federal Marshal James Garrett, he's the only lawman in the territory Vane hasn't bought, and you give him everything. The letters, the ledgers, your testimony, all of it. Cole, promise me, Leon May. Promise me that if I fall, you won't stop. You won't look back. You'll finish this." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against the rough stubble of his jaw. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that it momentarily stole his breath. "I promise," she said softly. "But you have to promise me something too." "What?" "That you'll survive. Because I'm not doing any of this without you at the end of it." Something shifted in Cole's chest, a feeling he'd thought died at Shiloh along with everything else. He covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face for just a moment longer than necessary. "I'll do my best," he said. "Your best better be good enough." They split up then, Cole slipping into the sage and working his way toward the rocky outcrop in a wide arc that kept him below the sightline of the cemetery. Leon May waited exactly 10 minutes by his pocket watch, then took a deep breath and walked her horse through the cemetery gate. Cole was 200 yards out when he heard Cutler's voice boom across the cemetery. "Well, well, the little bird comes home to roost." From his position behind a cluster of juniper, Cole could just see the scene unfolding. Leon May had stopped her horse near the ruined chapel. Cutler and 2 other men had emerged from cover near Webb's grave, rifles trained on her. Another man appeared from the cottonwood grove, and a 5th from behind a large monument. 5 total. Better than he'd feared, worse than he'd hoped. "Where's your protector?" Cutler called out, making a show of looking around. The great Cole Maddox too cowardly to face the consequences of his interference? "He's gone," Leon May said, and Cole heard the tremor in her voice. Real or manufactured, he couldn't tell, but it sounded convincing. "Left me 3 days ago when he realized what he'd gotten himself into." "That's so," Cutler sounded amused. "And here I had him pegged for the loyal type. Goes to show you can't trust anyone these days." Leon May dismounted slowly, keeping her hands visible. "I just want this to be over. I'll give you the letters. All of them. Just let me go." "Oh, it'll be over soon enough." Cutler moved closer, his rifle still trained on her center mass. "But see, Mr. Vane, he's got some questions for you. About who you might have told, where you might have sent copies, that sort of thing." "I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have time." "Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, you're coming back with us. After we dig up whatever Webb buried," Cutler gestured to his men. "Tie her up, and somebody find that damn grave." Cole had worked his way to within 70 yards of the rocky outcrop. He could see the man positioned there now, young, nervous, checking his rifle every few seconds, like he wasn't sure it would work. Not a professional. Probably a ranch hand given a gun and $50 to play soldier. That would make this easier. Cole raised his own rifle, sighted carefully, and fired. The shot cracked across the cemetery like thunder. The young man in the outcrop jerked and fell, his rifle clattering on the rocks. Cole didn't wait to see if he'd killed him. He was already moving, working the lever action, pivoting toward the cottonwood grove. Chaos erupted in the cemetery. "It's Maddox!" someone shouted. "He's behind us!" "Where? I don't see—" Cole's second shot took out one of the men near Cutler, catching him in the shoulder and spinning him around. The man went down hard, screaming. "Scatter!" Cutler roared. "Find him and kill him!" But Leon May didn't scatter. She did exactly what Cole had hoped she'd do. She ran. Not away from the danger, but toward Webb's grave, the satchel bouncing against her hip as her boots kicked up dust between the headstones. One of Vane's men raised his rifle to shoot her in the back, and Cole put a bullet through his leg. The man collapsed, cursing. Cole was running now too, staying low, using monuments and headstones for cover as he closed the distance. He could see Cutler tracking Leon May's movement, calculating, deciding. Then the older man raised his rifle and fired. The shot went wide, chipping stone off a nearby monument. Leon May stumbled but kept going, reaching a fresh grave with a simple wooden marker that read, "Marcus Webb, 1841 to 1876, may his conscience rest easier than his life." She dropped to her knees and started digging with her bare hands, clawing at the loose earth with desperate urgency. "Stop her!" Cutler bellowed. The man from the cottonwood grove broke cover, sprinting toward Leon May with his revolver drawn. Cole dropped him before he'd made it 20 feet. the rifle shot taking him high in the chest. 3 down. 2 left, plus Cutler. Cole was close enough now to see the rage on Cutler's face as the older man realized his carefully planned ambush had turned into a bloodbath. The remaining 2 gunmen had taken cover behind larger monuments, firing blind in Cole's general direction, but clearly rattled. Cutler made his choice. He ran toward Leon May, moving fast for a man his size, his rifle abandoned in favor of the revolver at his hip. He crossed the cemetery in long strides, heading straight for her. Cole tried to get a clear shot, but Leon May was in the way, and then Cutler was on her, grabbing her by the hair and hauling her to her feet. "Found you," Cutler snarled. Leon May twisted in his grip and drove something into Cutler's ribs, the small knife Cole had given her 3 weeks ago, the one he'd told her to keep hidden and use without hesitation if she ever needed it. Cutler roared and backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling. But the knife had done its work. Blood spread across Cutler's shirt in a dark stain, and when he tried to raise his revolver, his hand shook. Cole was there before Cutler could recover, his rifle barrel pressed against the older man's temple. "Drop it," Cole said quietly. Cutler's revolver fell into the dirt. "Call them off," Cole ordered. "Your men. Tell them to stand down or I paint this cemetery with your brains." For a moment, Cutler looked like he might refuse. Then he glanced at Leon May, who'd pushed herself up to sitting, blood trickling from her split lip, but her eyes blazing with defiance, and something like respect flickered across his face. "Stand down!" he called out. "Hold your fire!" The shooting stopped. Silence settled over the cemetery, broken only by the moaning of wounded men and the whistle of wind through the broken chapel. Cole kept his rifle trained on Cutler, but looked at Leon May. "You all right?" She nodded, touching her lip gingerly. "Better than him." The ledgers? Still digging. She turned back to the grave, her hands working through the loose earth. A minute later, she pulled up an oilcloth-wrapped package about the size of a Bible. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing 2 leather-bound ledgers, the pages yellowed but intact. "Got them," she said, her voice shaking with relief. "Good." Cole gestured with his rifle. "Cutler, you're going to walk real slow toward that chapel. Your men are going to do the same. Anyone makes a move I don't like, you die first. Understood?" Cutler nodded, his face pale from blood loss. The next few minutes were tense as Cole and Leon May backed toward their horses, keeping Cutler and his surviving men in sight. 2 were wounded badly enough that they couldn't have pursued even if they'd wanted to. The others looked shaken, their enthusiasm for Vane's money significantly diminished by the reality of bleeding friends. They reached the horses and mounted quickly. Cole kept his rifle trained on Cutler until the last possible moment. "Tell Vane we're coming for him," Leon May called out, her voice carrying across the cemetery. "Tell him every woman's name in those ledgers is going to be read in court. Every crime documented, every lie exposed. Tell him his empire is over." Cutler just stared at her, one hand pressed against his bleeding side. "You're dead," he said flatly. "You just don't know it yet." "Maybe," Leon May replied, "but I'll die free. Can he say the same?" They rode hard for Grafton, reaching the telegraph office before anyone could organize pursuit. The clerk was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and the cautious demeanor of someone who'd learned not to ask questions. "I need to send an urgent wire to Federal Marshal James Garrett in Helena," Cole said, laying coins on the counter. "And I need confirmation that it was received." The clerk looked at the money, then at Cole's face, then at Leon May standing behind him with a split lip and determination in her eyes. Whatever he saw there made him nod quickly. "Yes, sir." "What's the message?" Cole dictated carefully. "Evidence obtained. Witness secured. Dominic Vane corruption confirmed. Federal charges warranted. Will arrive Helena 5 days. Cole Maddox." The clerk wrote it down, tapped it out, and waited. 10 agonizing minutes later, the return message came through. "Received. Protection arranged. Federal court standing by. Come immediately. Garrett." Cole felt something unwind in his chest. They'd done it. The first impossible part was complete. "Now what?" Leon May asked as they left the telegraph office. "Now we ride like hell and hope we make it to Helena before Vane realizes what we just did." They bought supplies quickly: food, ammunition, fresh horses to replace their exhausted mounts. Then they were back on the trail, pushing north toward Helena and whatever waited there. The next 4 days blurred together into a relentless rhythm of riding and resting, always looking over their shoulders, always expecting pursuit. They avoided towns, stuck to game trails and back country, traveled sometimes at night when the moon was full enough to see by. On the second day, they spotted riders in the distance. Too far to identify, but close enough to make them change direction and lose 3 hours backtracking through rough country. On the third day, it rained, a cold, driving rain that soaked them through and made the trail treacherous. They took shelter in a shallow cave and waited it out, sharing whiskey from Cole's flask and talking quietly about what would happen when they reached Helena. "I'll have to testify," Leon May said, staring at the rain. "Tell everything. In open court." "Yes." "They'll ask me about what happened, what Vane did, what he made us do." Cole heard the fear in her voice, saw the way her hands trembled slightly. "You don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with. The ledgers and letters are evidence enough." "No." She looked at him, and he saw steel beneath the fear. "I want to answer. I want them to hear it. Every woman who didn't make it out, every woman who's still trapped there, they deserve to have their story told. And I'm the only one who can tell it." "You're the bravest person I've ever met," Cole said quietly. "I'm terrified." "Brave doesn't mean not scared. It means doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared." She smiled slightly. "Where'd you learn that?" "From a sergeant at Shiloh. Right before he got his head blown off leading a charge everyone knew was suicide." Cole took a drink of whiskey. He was right, though. Sometimes the scared ones are the bravest, because they know exactly what they're risking and they do it anyway. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain hammer the rocks outside their shelter. Then Leon May said, "After this is over, after the trial, what will you do?" Cole had been thinking about that question for days, turning it over in his mind late at night when sleep wouldn't come. "I don't know," he admitted. "Never really thought past surviving the war, then past surviving the guilt. This, helping you, fighting for something that matters, it's the first time in years I've felt like maybe there's a point to still being alive." "There's a point," Leon May said softly. "There's always been a point. You just needed to find it again." "Maybe. What about you?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "I used to have dreams. Before Vane. Before America even. I wanted to teach. My village didn't have a school, and most of the girls couldn't read. I thought maybe I could change that. Give them opportunities I never had. You still could, after. Could I?" She looked at him with something like hope and despair mixed together. "Who's going to hire a woman with my history? Who's going to trust me with their children once they know where I've been, what I've done? Someone with sense enough to see that what happened to you wasn't your fault. Someone who values courage more than reputation." Cole shifted closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. "And if no one else does, then you start your own school. Find the girls who need you most and teach them anyway. With what money? There are land grants for homesteaders, cheap property in Wyoming, Montana. You could—" He stopped himself, realizing what he was suggesting. "We could. If you wanted." Leon May turned to look at him fully, and he saw his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. "Are you asking me to stay? After this is over?" "I'm saying I don't want to imagine my life going back to what it was before. Empty, alone, just drifting." He took a breath. "I'm saying you matter to me. Not because I saved you, or because we're fighting this together, but because you're you. And the thought of riding away from you after Helena feels like losing something I just found." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to let someone in, how to trust that it won't all fall apart." "Neither do I. But maybe we figure it out together." "Maybe," she said, and then barely audible over the rain, "I'd like that." They stayed in the cave until the storm passed, holding hands like awkward children, neither sure what came next but both willing to try. On the fourth day, Helena appeared on the horizon, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley, smoke from hundreds of chimneys rising into clean mountain air. It was larger than any town they'd passed through, with real streets and brick buildings and the unmistakable sense of a place that mattered. Federal Marshal Garrett met them at the edge of town with 4 armed deputies. He was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much but hadn't given up yet. "Mr. Maddox, Miss Lyon." He nodded to each of them. "You've caused quite a stir. Vane's been flooding the territory with telegrams claiming you kidnapped one of his employees and stole proprietary business documents." "He would," Cole said. "He's also offering a substantial reward for your capture, dead or alive." Leon May's grip on the satchel tightened. "Are you going to collect it?" Garrett smiled grimly. "I'm going to put the son of a bitch in prison, if what you've told me is half as damning as I think it is. Let me see what you've got." They sat in Garrett's office for 6 hours, going through every letter, every entry in the ledgers, while the marshal made notes and asked sharp, penetrating questions. By the end, his expression had gone from interested to grim to something approaching fury. "This is worse than I thought," he said finally. "This isn't just local corruption. This goes all the way to Washington. Senators, judges, land office officials. He's got his fingers in everything." "Can you prosecute?" Cole asked. "Prosecute? I can hang him." Garrett looked at Leon May. "But I'm going to need you to testify. Everything. On the record. In open court. Can you do that?" Leon May straightened in her chair, and Cole saw the woman who'd stolen evidence from a monster and outrun death across 70 miles of hostile territory. "Yes," she said clearly. "I can do that." "Good. Because Dominic Vane is already on his way here with his lawyers and his bought judges. He thinks he can walk into my courthouse and make this go away like he's made everything else go away. I intend to prove him wrong." The trial began 3 days later in Helena's federal courthouse, an imposing building of gray stone that seemed designed to make people feel small and insignificant. But when Leon May walked through those doors, she didn't look small. She looked like justice incarnate. Cole sat in the gallery, watching as she took the stand. Vane sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence, flanked by 3 lawyers who'd probably never lost a case. The prosecutor, a federal attorney named Morrison, who'd traveled from San Francisco specifically for this trial, stood and approached the witness box. "State your name for the record, please." "Leon May Chen." "Miss Chen, how did you come to work for the defendant, Dominic Vane?" And she told them everything. The false advertisement, the promises, the contract that turned into a cage. She told them about the other women, about Sarah who died from an infected whip wound, about the ledgers that documented it all like livestock inventory. Her voice never wavered. She didn't cry. She simply stated facts in clear, precise language that cut through every defense Vane's lawyers tried to mount. When Morrison entered the letters and ledgers into evidence, reading name after name, payment after payment, Vane's confidence began to crack. The bought judges squirmed. The senators in attendance suddenly remembered pressing business elsewhere. The cross-examination was brutal. Vane's lead attorney tried everything, attacked her credibility, her character, her morality. Suggested she'd stolen the documents out of spite or greed or mental instability. Leon May met every attack with calm certainty. "You claim these letters prove corruption," the attorney said, waving a sheaf of papers. "But you're a woman of questionable virtue who admits to stealing from her employer. Why should this court believe anything you say?" Leon May looked directly at the jury. "Because the truth doesn't care about my virtue. The truth is written in black and white in those letters, in numbers that don't lie, in the words of powerful men who never thought anyone would be brave enough to expose them. You don't have to believe me. Believe them." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict in a voice that echoed through the silent courtroom. "We find the defendant, Dominic Vane, guilty on all counts: human trafficking, bribery, conspiracy to defraud, extortion." The list went on and on. 23 separate counts, each one carrying a sentence that would add up to more years than Vane had left to live. The judge, a federal appointee who'd come in specifically because every territorial judge was compromised, showed no mercy. "Mr. Vane, you have used your wealth and influence to create a system of slavery in everything but name. You have destroyed lives, corrupted institutions, and betrayed every principle this nation claims to stand for. The court sentences you to 40 years in federal prison, to be served in full with no possibility of parole. May you spend every day of those years reflecting on the suffering you caused. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. Vane's face went white, then red. He started to speak, to protest, but the marshals were already moving, taking him into custody with swift efficiency. As they led him past Lee and May, he stopped and looked at her with pure hatred. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "You think this changes anything? There will always be men like me, and women like you will always—" "Be free," Lee and May interrupted quietly. "Women like me will always be free now, because you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cage, while I get to walk out of here and build whatever life I want. That's the difference between us, Mr. Vane. I have a future. You don't." They led Vane away in chains, and for the first time since Lee and May could remember, the weight that had pressed against her chest for 6 months lifted. She could breathe, really breathe. Cole was waiting outside the courtroom, leaning against the stone wall with his hat in his hands. When she emerged through the heavy oak doors, he straightened, and something passed between them that needed no words. Relief. Gratitude. Something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. "It's over," she said, though the words felt strange in her mouth. Unreal. "It's over," Cole confirmed. He offered his arm, and she took it, letting him guide her down the courthouse steps and into the afternoon sunlight. Helena bustled around them, wagons rumbling past, shopkeepers calling out their wares, the ordinary chaos of a town going about its business. But it all felt distant, like watching life through glass. Marshal Garrett caught up with them at the bottom of the steps. "Miss Chen, there are some matters we need to discuss. The other women mentioned in the ledgers, we've already sent deputies to Vane's ranch. They'll be brought here, given medical attention if needed, and offered safe passage to wherever they want to go." Lee and May felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You're the one who made this happen." Garrett pulled an envelope from his coat. "The federal government is also prepared to offer compensation to the victims. It's not much and it doesn't undo what was done, but it's something. Your share is in here." She took the envelope but didn't open it. Money felt meaningless compared to what she'd lost, what they'd all lost. But Garrett was right. It was something. A start. "There's one more thing," the marshal continued. "Several newspapers want to interview you, tell your story. The San Francisco Chronicle, the Denver Post, even the New York Tribune. They think what you did, standing up to Vane, exposing the corruption, they think people need to hear about it." Lee and May looked at Cole, who squeezed her hand gently. The choice was hers. "Maybe," she said slowly, "but not now. Right now I just want to be quiet. For a while." Garrett nodded, understanding. "Fair enough. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, let me know. In the meantime, you're free to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. You're your own woman now, Miss Chen. Your own woman." The phrase settled over her like a blessing. For the first time in her adult life, she belonged to no one but herself. They stayed in Helena for another week while the legal aftermath sorted itself out. The federal prosecutor needed Lee and May to sign statements, verify documents, meet with investigators tracking down the other men implicated in Vane's network. It was exhausting work, but necessary. In the evenings, she and Cole would walk through the town, not talking much, just being together in the growing twilight. Sometimes they'd sit by the creek that ran through the south end of Helena, watching the water catch the last light of day. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lee and May ventured one evening. "About Wyoming, about land." Cole had been skipping stones across the water, but he stopped and turned to her. And I think I'd like to see it, the valley you mentioned, where you thought about building something. It's rough country, remote. Winters are hard. I've survived worse than hard winters." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That you have." He was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "I want you to understand what I'm offering. It's not much. A piece of land, a cabin we'd have to build ourselves, work that'll break your back and test every bit of strength you have. It's not an easy life." "I don't want easy," Lee and May said. "I want honest. I want to build something that's mine, ours, that no one can take away. Can that valley give me that?" "Yes," Cole said simply. "If we're willing to work for it." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his, the way she had in the cave during the rainstorm. "Then let's go see it." They left Helena 3 days later, heading northwest into country that grew wilder with each mile. The land rolled and climbed, sage giving way to pine, valleys opening up between mountains that still held snow on their highest peaks despite the summer heat. Cole led them along trails that barely deserved the name, through passes where eagles soared and elk grazed in meadows thick with wildflowers. He'd ridden this country before the war, he told her, back when he'd been young and foolish enough to think he could escape his own thoughts by putting enough distance between himself and civilization. Did it work? Lian Mei asked. No, but the country's still beautiful, even if it can't cure what's broken inside you. Maybe that's not what it's supposed to do. Maybe it's just supposed to give you space to heal yourself. Cole looked at her with something like wonder. You're a wise woman, Lian Mei Chen. I'm a woman who's learned that running doesn't solve anything, but choosing where you stand, that might. The valley revealed itself on the afternoon of the fourth day, spreading out below them as they crested a ridge. It was everything Cole had described and more. A wide expanse of grassland bordered by pine forest, a clear creek running through the center, the whole thing cradled between protective hills. Isolated but not desolate, remote but not empty. There, Cole said, pointing to a rise near the creek. That's where I'd build. High enough to avoid flooding, close enough to water for convenience. Good southern exposure for the garden, trees nearby for timber. Lian Mei studied the site, imagining. A cabin, simple but solid, a barn for animals, fields for crops. Maybe someday a small schoolhouse where children from the scattered ranches could come to learn. It's perfect, she said. They made camp that night beside the creek, and as stars emerged in the darkening sky, Cole built a fire and Lian Mei prepared the simple meal they'd brought with them. The domesticity of it felt strange and wonderful, ordinary actions that carried extraordinary weight because they were choosing them freely. I need to tell you something, Lian Mei said as they ate. Something I haven't told anyone. Cole looked up, firelight catching in his winter sky eyes. All right. When I was at Vane's ranch, I tried to escape once before, about 3 months after I arrived. I made it as far as the property line before his men caught me. She stared into the fire, seeing ghosts in the flames. They dragged me back. Vane was waiting. He didn't hit me. He was smarter than that. He just looked at me and said, "You're mine. You'll always be mine. You can run 1,000 times and I'll bring you back 1,000 times. Because you're worthless. You're nothing. And the sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." Cole's jaw had gone tight, but he didn't interrupt. And for a while I believed him, Lian Mei continued. I stopped fighting, stopped hoping. I became exactly what he said I was. Nothing, just a body going through motions, waiting to die. She looked at Cole then, really looked at him. But then I found those letters, and something in me woke up. Rage, maybe, or just stubborn refusal to let him be right. I thought if I could expose him, if I could burn down his empire, maybe I could prove I was something after all. You did prove it, Cole said quietly. I proved it to the world, but I'm still trying to prove it to myself. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Sometimes late at night, I still hear his voice, still feel like I'm nothing. Like everything that happened, the trial, the verdict, even this, is just a dream, and I'll wake up back in that place. Cole set down his plate and moved closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. You want to know what I see when I look at you? He asked. What? I see a woman who survived hell and came out stronger. I see someone who risked everything for people she didn't even know because it was right. I see courage and intelligence and a kind of fierce determination that most men I served with would have envied. He turned to face her fully. But most of all, I see someone who gets to decide who she is now. Vane doesn't get a vote anymore. The past doesn't get to write your future. Only you do. Lian Mei felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of pain. They were something else. Release, maybe. Or acceptance. I want to believe that, she said. Then believe it every day, until it becomes true. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, and they sat like that until the fire burned down to embers and the night grew cold around them. They spent the next 2 weeks in the valley, and Cole showed her everything he'd envisioned years ago when he'd first found this place. He paced out the foundation of the cabin, explaining how he'd build it to withstand the harsh winters. He took her to a natural spring that bubbled up near the tree line, cold and clean and reliable. He pointed out where they could plant gardens, where they could graze cattle or horses, where the hunting was best. But it was Lee and May who saw the possibilities Cole had missed. She found a flat area near the creek that would be perfect for a schoolhouse, sheltered from wind, but open enough for children to play. She identified medicinal plants growing wild: sage for fever, yarrow for wounds, wild mint for stomach ailments, that could be cultivated and sold to supplement their income. She even sketched out plans for a root cellar that would keep food fresh through the winter months. "You've thought about this," Cole observed, watching her make notes in a journal she'd bought in Helena. "I have time to think now, time to plan, time to dream." She looked up from her notes. "Is that strange? That I'm excited about root cellars and vegetable gardens?" "It's not strange. It's beautiful." Cole crouched beside her, studying the sketches. "You're building a life, our life. That's about the least strange thing I can imagine." Our life. The phrase sent warmth through Lee and May's chest. She'd been part of other people's plans her whole life. Her family's back in China, the employment agencies, veins. But this was different. This was partnership, choice. "Cole," she said carefully, "what are we exactly? To each other." He was quiet for a moment, and she wondered if she'd overstepped, pushed too hard, too fast. Then he said, "I don't know what the proper word is. Partner doesn't feel big enough. Friend feels too small. All I know is that when I imagine the future, you're in it. Every single day, you're in it." "That sounds like more than a business arrangement." "It is more. A lot more." He met her eyes. "I'm not good at this. At talking about feelings or making promises about forever. The war taught me that forever can end in a second. But I can promise you today, and tomorrow, and every day after that for as long as we both want it." Lee and May reached out and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm, the scar along his cheekbone, the warmth of living skin. "I want it," she said. "Today, tomorrow, all of it." Cole leaned into her touch, then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he kissed her. It was gentle and tentative, and carried the weight of everything unspoken between them, fear and hope, and the fragile belief that maybe, despite everything, they deserved something good. When they finally pulled apart, Lee and May was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep and true. "So we're building a cabin," she said. "We're building a cabin," Cole agreed. "And a barn, and a barn, and eventually a schoolhouse." "Eventually a schoolhouse," he grinned. "Anything else while we're planning our empire?" "A garden, a big one, with flowers, not just vegetables. I want flowers." "Then you'll have flowers." They started building the next day. Cole had construction experience from his time building the first cabin, and Leanne May proved surprisingly adept at learning carpentry despite never having held a hammer before. They worked from dawn until dusk, felling trees and stripping logs, digging the foundation and laying stones for the chimney. It was brutal work. Leanne May's hands blistered within the first week, then calloused over. Her back ached from hauling timber. She learned to swing an axe, to notch logs, to measure twice and cut once because mistakes cost time and materials they couldn't spare. But there was something profoundly satisfying about it. Every log they placed, every nail they drove, was a piece of the life they were choosing. No one was forcing them. No one was profiting from their labor. They were building for themselves, and that made even the exhaustion feel worthwhile. Word got out somehow, news traveled in mysterious ways across the frontier, and one day they had visitors. 3 families from Homestead scattered through the surrounding hills, arriving with wagons full of supplies and offers of help. "Heard you folks were building," said a weathered man who introduced himself as Thomas Wright. "Figured you could use some extra hands. That's how we do things out here." Cole looked uncertain. He'd gotten used to isolation, to handling things alone, but Lee and May stepped forward with a smile. "We'd be grateful for the help," she said. "And when you need help with your own projects, we'll be there." That was how barn raisings worked, Thomas explained. Communities scattered across vast distances, but coming together when needed, helping each other survive in country that could be merciless to those who tried to go it alone. With help, the cabin went up in 3 weeks instead of 3 months. It was simple. 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, a loft for sleeping, but it was solid and tight, and theirs. Thomas's wife, Margaret, helped Lee and May make curtains from fabric they'd brought from Helena. Another neighbor, a widow named Ruth, showed her how to make soap and candles from tallow and lye. The women didn't ask questions about Lee and May's past. If they'd heard rumors, and in the frontier everyone heard everything eventually, they kept it to themselves. They simply accepted her as one of them, a woman building a life in hard country, and that acceptance meant more to Lee and May than any words could express. The barn went up next, smaller than the cabin, but sturdy enough to shelter horses, and eventually a milk cow and chickens. Cole built stalls with careful precision, while Lee and May started breaking ground for the garden, turning soil that had never been cultivated, pulling rocks and roots, mixing in compost they'd started the moment they arrived. By the time September arrived, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson, they had a functioning homestead. Modest, rough around the edges, but undeniably real. The cabin had a proper door that locked from the inside, something Leon May had insisted on, and Cole had understood without needing explanation. The garden had yielded its first harvest of potatoes, squash, and beans. They'd even acquired 2 horses from a rancher selling off stock before winter. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost dreamlike in its ordinary peace. They'd wake with the sun, tend to the animals, work the land, prepare meals together. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch Cole had built, Lee and May's one extravagance, and watch the stars emerge while they talked about everything and nothing. Sometimes they talked about the trial. Marshal Garrett sent letters occasionally, updating them on the fallout from Vane's conviction. 3 senators had resigned in disgrace. 4 judges had been removed from their positions. The land office in the territory had been completely reorganized under federal oversight. The women who'd been freed from Vane's ranch had been offered jobs and housing, and most had accepted, beginning the slow process of reclaiming their lives. Sarah's sister wrote to me, Lee and May said one evening, holding a letter that had arrived via the mail rider who passed through once a month. She wanted to thank me, said Sarah would have been proud. Cole reached over and took her hand. Sarah would have been proud. What you did, it honored her memory, honored all of them. Other times they talked about the future. Cole wanted to expand their herd, maybe buy cattle in the spring. Leon May wanted to start the school even if she only had 1 or 2 students at first. They talked about improvements to the cabin, a proper wood floor, glass windows instead of oiled paper, maybe even a pump for the kitchen instead of hauling water from the creek. And sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat in comfortable silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching their valley settle into night. Winter came hard that year. Snow started falling in October and didn't really stop until March. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, their world reduced to the cabin and the barn and the 50-foot path between them that Cole kept shoveled. It could have been suffocating, 2 people trapped in close quarters with nowhere to escape, but instead it felt like cocooning. They played cards by lamplight. Lee and May taught Cole some Chinese, laughing at his pronunciation. Cole taught her to shoot properly, practicing with targets set up in the barn when the weather was too fierce to venture outside. They read books they'd brought from Helena, sometimes aloud to each other, and slowly, carefully, they learned each other in ways that went deeper than conversation. The way Lee and May needed space in the mornings, time to wake up and gather herself before facing the day. The way Cole's hands would shake sometimes for no reason, echoes of battles long past. They learned to read each other's silences, to know when to push and when to give room, to comfort without smothering. One particularly brutal night in January, the wind howling so fiercely it sounded like the valley itself was screaming, Lee and May woke from a nightmare. She was back in Vane's ranch, locked in the cellar, Sarah's screams echoing through the walls. She jolted upright, gasping, disoriented. Cole was there immediately, his voice cutting through the panic. Lee and May, you're safe. You're in our cabin, in Wyoming. Vane's in prison. You're safe. She gripped his arm, feeling the solid reality of him, using it to anchor herself back to the present. I'm sorry, she gasped. I thought I was done with these. I thought, healing isn't linear, Cole said gently. Some wounds take time, years, maybe. That's okay. Does it ever stop, the nightmares? I don't know. Mine haven't, but they get less frequent, less intense. And having someone there when they hit, that helps. She looked at him in the dim glow of the banked fire. Do you have them? Tonight? Not tonight, but I will. And when I do, you'll be there. That's what this is. What we are. We take turns being strong when the other one can't be. Lian Mei leaned into him, letting his warmth chase away the last echoes of the nightmare. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here, for staying. Where else would I be?" Spring arrived late, but glorious. The snow receded, revealing the valley transformed into a carpet of wildflowers, lupine and Indian paintbrush and flowers. Lian Mei didn't have names for. The creek ran high with snowmelt, cold and crystalline. Birds returned in raucous flocks, building nests and filling the air with song. They planted the garden again, twice as large as the previous year. Cole brought home chickens from a neighboring ranch, and suddenly they had fresh eggs. A calf was born to the milk cow they'd acquired in the fall, wobbly and adorable, and Lian Mei started the school. It was nothing formal at first, just two children from the Wright family who came twice a week to learn reading and arithmetic. But Thomas spread the word, and soon there were 5 students, then 7. Lian Mei taught them in the cabin at first, but Cole could see it wasn't practical, so they built the schoolhouse. It was smaller than a proper school, just one room with a wood stove and benches Cole constructed from pine. But it had windows that let in light, and a blackboard Lian Mei ordered from a catalog, and shelves for the small collection of books they'd accumulated. The day they opened, a warm morning in May, 9 children showed up. 9 children whose parents trusted them to a woman who'd been owned, who'd been trafficked, who'd survived hell and somehow emerged on the other side with enough grace to teach their sons and daughters. Lian Mei stood at the front of that small room, looking at those young faces, and felt something shift inside her. This was redemption. Not because she needed redeeming, she'd done nothing wrong, but because she was taking the life that had been stolen from her and transforming it into something beautiful, something that mattered. "My name is Miss Chen," she said clearly, "and I'm here to help you learn, to help you become whoever you want to be, because education is freedom. Remember that." From the doorway, Cole watched her teach and felt his heart swell with something that might have been love, or pride, or hope, or all 3 mixed together until they were indistinguishable. Summer brought visitors, Marshal Garrett riding up unannounced one July afternoon, leading a pack horse laden with supplies. "Thought I'd check on you two," he said, accepting the coffee Lian Mei offered. "Make sure you hadn't killed each other living in isolation." "We're managing," Cole said with a grin. "I can see that." Garrett looked around at the homestead, the garden bursting with vegetables, the chickens pecking in their yard, the schoolhouse visible across the meadow. "You've built something good here." "We're trying," Lian Mei said. The marshal pulled a newspaper from his saddlebag. "There's something you should see." The Tribune ran a story about the trial, about you. Lian Mei took the paper with trembling hands. The headline read, "From Slave to Savior, One Woman's Fight Against Frontier Corruption." Below it was her name, printed in bold letters for the world to see. She read it slowly, Cole reading over her shoulder. The reporter had interviewed the other women who'd been freed, had documented their stories, had painted a comprehensive picture of Vane's operation and its destruction. But the focus was on Lian Mei, her courage, her determination, her refusal to let evil triumph. "They're calling you a hero," Garrett said. "Women's rights groups are citing your case as proof that the law can work for everyone, not just the powerful. There's even talk of federal legislation to prosecute human trafficking more aggressively." Lian Mei set the paper down, her hands still shaking. "I just wanted to stop him. I didn't think about all this." "That's what makes it matter," the marshal said. "You didn't do it for glory or recognition. You did it because it was right. That's real heroism." After Garrett left, Lian Mei and Cole sat on the porch and watched the sun set over their valley. The newspaper sat between them, a tangible reminder that their actions had rippled outward in ways they couldn't have imagined. "Do you regret it?" Cole asked quietly. "Any of it?" Lian Mei thought about the question, about the pain and fear, the nightmares that still occasionally woke her in the dark hours before dawn, the scars on her back that would never fully fade. Then she thought about the cabin they'd built, the school where children learned, the garden that fed them, the man beside her who'd caught her when she fell and never let go. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I regret what happened before, what Vane did, what I endured. But fighting back, surviving, building this life, I don't regret any of that." "Good." Cole reached for her hand. "Because I don't either." As autumn painted the valley gold again, Leah and May discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening as they worked together preparing the garden for winter, pulling the last of the vegetables and turning the soil. He stopped mid-motion, the shovel falling from his hands. You're, we're, we're going to have a baby, Leah and May confirmed, and she was smiling through the tears streaming down her face. In the spring. Cole crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he finally loosened his grip, his own eyes were wet. "I never thought," he said, his voice breaking. "After everything, after the war and the loss and the years of just existing, I never thought I'd get to have this. A family, a real family." "Neither did I," Leah and May whispered. "I thought that part of my life was over before it began. But here we are." They stood there in the garden as the sun sank lower, holding each other, planning for a future that felt impossibly bright. The baby came in April, a boy with his father's eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Samuel, after Cole's brother who died at Gettysburg, and Way, after Leah and May's father. Samuel Way Maddox, a child born from ashes and built from hope. Leah and May had been terrified of childbirth. The memories of women at Vane's ranch who'd died in labor, who'd been given no care, no compassion, but Margaret Wright and Ruth had been there, experienced and competent, guiding her through with steady hands and encouraging words. And Cole had been there too, holding her hand, whispering words of love and encouragement, refusing to leave even when Margaret suggested he might be more comfortable waiting outside. "I'm not leaving," he'd said firmly. She didn't have anyone when she needed them most before. "She'll have me now." When Samuel finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, Cole had wept openly. He held his son with hands that had killed and destroyed, now cradling new life with infinite gentleness. "Hello," he whispered. "Hello, little man. Welcome to the world. We're going to do right by you, I promise." Leah and May watched father and son together, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was what freedom looked like. Not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice, the ability to love and be loved, to build and create, to bring new life into a world that had tried so hard to break her. The school had grown to 15 students by then, and Leah and May had hired a young woman named Elizabeth to help with teaching. Elizabeth was smart and patient, and didn't mind that her employer had a past that would have scandalized people in more conventional places. "Out here," Elizabeth had said with a shrug, "everyone's running from something or toward something. What matters is who you are now, not who you were forced to be." Leah and May taught when she could, spent the rest of her time raising Samuel and managing the homestead alongside Cole. Their herd had grown to 20 head of cattle. The garden produced more than they could use, so they sold surplus at the small trading post that had sprung up 15 miles east. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, stable, safe. Years passed. Samuel grew into a curious, bright child who loved his mother's stories and his father's patient explanations of how things worked. 2 more children followed, a daughter they named Sarah, after the friend Leah and May had lost, and another son they called James, after Marshall Garrett, who'd made justice possible. The school expanded, eventually becoming a proper building with 2 rooms and a real bell tower. Students came from as far as 30 miles away, boarding with families during the week so they could attend. Leah and May trained other teachers, women who might not have had opportunities elsewhere, but who proved brilliant educators. The valley became a community. More homesteaders arrived, drawn by word of good land and good neighbors. A church went up. Though Leah and May and Cole rarely attended, they'd both seen too much to find comfort in conventional faith. A general store opened, then a blacksmith, then a doctor. Through it all, Cole and Leah and May remained the steady center. The couple who'd come to the valley with nothing but determination and built something that lasted. People sought Cole's advice on construction and livestock. They came to Leah and May for education and medical knowledge she'd accumulated through necessity and study. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work was done, they'd sit together on the porch Cole had built all those years ago, expanded now, with proper railings and a swing, and watch the stars emerge over their valley. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Leah and May asked one such evening. Samuel was 7 now, Sarah 5, James just learning to walk. "If you hadn't been in Sentinel Creek that day, If you'd walked past instead of catching me. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. I think about it sometimes, he admitted, but not the way you might expect. I don't wonder what my life would have been like without you. I wonder how I survived all those years before you. How I found the strength to keep going when everything felt empty. You would have managed. You're strong. I was surviving. That's not the same as living. He pulled her closer. You gave me a reason to live again. To build instead of just endure. I should be thanking you. We saved each other, Lian May said simply. That's what love is, I think. Not one person rescuing the other, but two people choosing to build something together that neither could have built alone. When did you get so wise? Around the time I realized that the woman Vane said was worthless had built a school, raised 3 children, and created a community where there was nothing but wilderness. She smiled. Turns out he was wrong about everything. Cole laughed, the sound warm and free. He was indeed. More years passed. Samuel went off to university in Denver, then came back to teach at his mother's school. Sarah became a doctor, inspired by the medical knowledge her mother had accumulated and shared. James took over the ranch, expanding it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. And through it all, Cole and Lian May remained, growing older, graying, slowing down but never stopping. They were fixtures of the community, the founders, the elders, the ones who'd built something from nothing and shown others it could be done. On Lian May's 65th birthday, the entire valley turned out for a celebration. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Children ran shrieking with joy. A fiddle player provided music while couples danced in the evening light. Marshall Garrett, long retired but still vital, had made the journey from Helena. He stood beside Lian May, watching the celebration, and shook his head in wonder. You know what I think about sometimes? He said. That day in the courtroom, when you faced down Vane, when you refused to let him diminish you. I knew then that you were going to do something extraordinary, but I had no idea it would be this. This? Lian May looked around at the valley, the people, the life she'd built. A legacy. Not just justice for the women he hurt, though that mattered, but this, a community. A school that's educated hundreds of children, a family that's thriving. Lives touched and changed because you refused to give up. Lian May felt tears prick her eyes. I just wanted to survive, to be free. And look what you did with that freedom. Look what you built. Garrett squeezed her shoulder. Sarah would be proud. All of them would be. That night, after the celebration ended and the guests had departed, Lian May and Cole sat on their porch one more time. The valley was quiet now, peaceful, bathed in moonlight. Do you ever regret not going back? Cole asked. To China, I mean. To find your family. Lian May had thought about it over the years, had even written letters, though she'd never received responses. She'd made peace with the idea that her mother and siblings either couldn't reply or didn't want to. The daughter who'd gone to America and disappeared might as well be dead to them. This is my family now, she said, gesturing to the valley, the cabin, the life they'd built. You, our children, this community. I didn't choose to leave China, but I chose to build here, and I'm content with that choice. Content's a good word. Better than happy? Different. Happy comes and goes. Content is deeper. It's peace. Lian May leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth of him beside her. I am peaceful, she said. For the first time in my life, I'm truly at peace. They sat there until the moon rose high and the night grew cold. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and built the best possible life. Two people who'd survived hell and created heaven. Not because the world gave it to them, but because they'd fought for it, built it, and refused to let anyone take it away. The valley slept around them, peaceful and safe, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, hope over despair, and building over breaking. And in that moment, under the wide Wyoming sky, Lian May knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice all those years ago. Not just stealing the letters, not just running, but trusting the stranger who'd caught her when she fell. Because he hadn't just saved her life that day in Sentinel Creek, he'd given her a reason to live it. And together, they'd built something that would last long after they were gone. a legacy of courage, resilience, and the unshakable belief that even broken people could create something whole. The end had become a beginning, and what a beautiful beginning it was.